Listening to netizens and deciding to leave my husband, I realized too late how foolish I was. Women online told me my husband was beyond help and that I should run while I still had time. But not long after our divorce, I regretted it and realized how stupid I had been. My husband and I fell in love in college, and he was 3 years older than me. We both came from rural areas to study in Hanoi. I'm from Ha Tinh, while my husband is from Cao Bang. Due to the great geographical distance, we had to overcome many difficulties and ups and downs to convince our families to let us be together. Our newlywed life was very warm and happy. However, like any other marriage, my family couldn't avoid conflicts, misunderstandings, and arguments. After a year of living together, I increasingly saw more of my husband's bad habits, the most unbearable of which were his love for drinking and lending money to friends without ever asking for it back. My husband was always generous with people outside, often treating the whole group to meals and karaoke sessions costing more than 10 billion VND. There wasn't a gathering or drinking party where he wasn't present. Besides socializing with colleagues, he also had a soccer group that met 3 times a week. Of course, after the game, there was drinking. After these matches, he never came home in a normal state, always returning after 11 p.m., completely drunk. I know drinking is a fun pastime for men, but there should be limits. My husband was excessively indulgent. Apart from work, he put all his attention into these gatherings, making me feel unloved like before. We hadn't planned for children yet, wanting to enjoy married life a little longer, but his fun had nothing to do with me. He already neglected me without kids. When we have a baby, I would be left raising it alone. My husband was always dedicated to his friends, readily lending them money without ever asking for it back. If they voluntarily paid him, he'd accept it. If they forgot, he wouldn't remind them. If only a few friends didn't repay, it wouldn't be a big deal. But as far as I know, the number of friends borrowing money like this reached dozens, including some I didn't even know, meaning they weren't close to him. Even if each person borrowed only 5 to 10 million VND, the total loss was significant for a young couple. I gave my husband feedback many times, but he always defended his friends, saying friendships shouldn't be too picky about money, and they'd pay him back eventually. Feeling powerless with my husband, I shared my story on an online forum, hoping for advice. It turned out many other women were in or had been through similar situations, and some, whose husbands were better, were angry on my behalf. They flooded the comments with advice, most sympathizing with me and criticizing my husband, which comforted me greatly. The online community analyzed that my husband was selfish and heartless, only kind to others to boost his reputation while ignoring me, his wife. They said he wasn't worthy of me, that living with someone like him could never bring happiness. They pointed out that I was still young and beautiful, but he treated me like this. What would happen when I lost my looks? Many women urged me to be firm with my husband, demanding he choose between family happiness or endless fun with outsiders. They said modern women can't accept being a man's shadow and must be cherished and respected. Listening to them, I tried to change my husband, but it didn't work. Our arguments increased, and I grew tired and disappointed, wondering why I ever loved and married him. At such moments, the online community became my source of motivation and support, advising me how to handle each specific situation. After one big argument, my husband slammed the door and left to drink all night. That was the last straw for me. I posted again, asking for advice, and many people urged me to divorce, saying my husband was hopeless, and I should escape while I still could, not waste my youth on a man who didn't care about me. Some even messaged me privately to encourage me to be strong and change my life, aiming for happiness. I felt there was no hope left in this marriage, so I wrote up divorce papers. My husband didn't agree and called me foolish and shallow, saying I was acting irrationally for my age. In response, I hurled harsh words at him, letting out all the resentment I had bottled up, using the worst adjectives, making him so angry that he smashed glasses onto the floor and left for the night again. His actions only convinced me further that divorce was the right choice. After going through the reconciliation procedures, my husband still asked me to reconsider, but his lack of sincerity left me cold, and I lost all hope. We got divorced. The women online congratulated me for escaping a bad man, a toxic marriage, and starting a new life. But my single life only brought joy for a very short time. I quickly felt lonely and empty, with no one to share my happiness or sadness after a tiring workday. Every evening, once all the work was done, there was no one to wait for. When something heavy or difficult happened at home, there was no one to rely on. When I was sick, I didn't know who to complain to. My parents lived far away, and my friends were busy with their own lives. I didn't want to burden them with complaints. In truth, I couldn't give them a chance to scold me for my decision to divorce despite their advice. I also faced financial difficulties. My office job brought in just over 8 million VND a month, nearly half of which went toward rent, leaving little for living expenses. Before, I never worried about money, spending my salary on snacks, clothes, and makeup because my husband had a high income. It wasn't just the comfortable life my ex-husband provided that I missed. I truly missed him. After not seeing him for a while, I remembered his good qualities and realized that aside from his drinking and wasting money on friends, he was a great person. After days of fooling myself, I quickly admitted I'd made a hasty mistake in divorcing him. I regretted it deeply. Thinking back to how adamant and rushed I was to leave him, I felt utterly foolish. I struggled with the idea of setting aside my pride to contact my ex-husband, expressing my regret and longing, hoping for a second chance. When I finally resolved to swallow my pride and ask him for another opportunity, I accidentally ran into him at a cafe with another woman, his new girlfriend. They were preparing for their wedding. That day, I took some close friends out for drinks, getting completely drunk, losing all self-control, and confessing all my regrets. But by then, I knew it was too late. I had let strangers who didn't understand my situation decide my life for me. After a period of depression, with the support and comfort of friends and family, I regained balance. What's lost cannot be recovered, so I must treat it as a costly lesson on my journey to find happiness. I've realized I need to accept that the perfect man I imagined from romantic movies doesn't exist, and that I must see the good in real men. Most importantly, I've learned I must understand and decide my own life, not be swayed by irresponsible online advice.